everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Lisa at the Edge. In this episode, I'm joined by another awesome guest, Dave Kurth, or at the Dave Kurth, if you want to be connecting on Twitter. And today we're going to have another chat about career development, but then we're probably going to dive into a little bit about hybrid cloud. Myself and Dave have now had two prep calls for this where we basically just went on tangents about various topics, and we really should have hit the record button, but we're here now and we're recording, and that is what counts. So Dave, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. And as you said, right, we had, it's long in the making technically, but we had to move it a few times and it's finally happening. So super excited and grateful to be on your podcast. So yeah, about myself. So currently I'm working as a senior PM on Azure Stack Hub, focusing on security at the edge, basically. So quite a challenging topic, but interesting. But worked for Microsoft about 9 years. And before that, mainly in IT, but I also had my startup of many years ago, it feels at least many years ago, that made customized snowboards and skateboards in Switzerland.
Amazing. Okay, so let's dive into this a little bit. So we're going to start off by asking you how you got into tech and whether you always wanted to be in tech. And there was a little bit of a hint there with the startup and the snowboard. So tell me when you're just a young boy, Dave, not that far ago, not that long ago. Is technology always where you wanted to be?
Pretty much, I would say since fourth, fifth grade. I think from fifth grade on, I knew it was IT.
Right.
But I have to admit that how I imagined IT at that age was what we have now. I imagined these big cloud data centers and
Okay.
fancy, right? When I got into IT, it turns out there was a lot of user problems you have to deal with, escalations.
Oh.
And the time you spend, or most companies I worked for, or like when I worked for a Microsoft partner, none of these customers were that size that have these fancy data centers that I imagined. But let's say electronic lights blinking and buttons always interested me from a young age on.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So how did your career in tech begin? Did you go to university? Did you start on a help desk like most people? And where did the startup come in to it all?
So I'm a bit of an anomaly, I think, at Microsoft. At least I don't know many that have a similar career path. So I'm not coming from a university. I started in Switzerland as an apprentice in an apprenticeship, which is for my colleagues here in the US often a foreign concept in their head. Apprenticeships is like a few weeks, maybe a few months tops program. In Switzerland, depending on the profession you have. So basically, when you come out of middle school, you can either go to the traditional more college or like an apprenticeship. And basically what Switzerland does is basically deciding, hey, we need more talent in this area or in this job. And it doesn't make sense as an example to be a salesperson or otherwise to go to college, depending on what you're selling. Or in IT, not everybody's going to create the next big tech company, but we need more people on the ground. And they basically make these programs in, for example, IT case, it's the longest. So the longest apprenticeships are 4 years.
Okay.
In IT, it's 2 weeks school. And so you basically get everything. So you could go later to the college within that. Let's say for me, technical college, I couldn't go and study philosophy or any non-technical study courses, but I could try to get my basically graduate degree. But it's basically 4 years. In my case, so you apply for a job. Normally, I worked for a Microsoft partner, a smaller one in Switzerland. And so it's actually very interesting. So you have theoretically 2 days and you have everything from chemistry, physics, electronics, basic over these 4 years. But then the other 3 days, you're actually working in that company and helping customers. So kind of like you apply the knowledge as you're going. And so
that's really cool.
So back then, if you told me that one day I work in engineering at Microsoft, I wouldn't have believed you. That would have been a very distant dream. Again, not coming from the traditional, let's say, superstar college or something like that some of my peers come from. But yeah, that's basically how it started. And that's why I'm saying, right, like in the first 2 years, as you can imagine in IT, you help with, let's say, minor work or less complex works, which could be like floor supporting at customers, could be like, back in the days, we still had a company called Compact that later got bought by HP, but like Compact was a thing. It wasn't very upgradable, but it was a thing back then. So it was often like even delivering. I remember the schools in the state bought like new IT systems, so we had to image all the systems and then set it up in the classrooms, go for checklists, like things like that. And then third and fourth year, you're gonna get more complex issues. You may get involved in exchange migration, or for example, one of the projects I had to do for my final exams, which you have to submit a proposal, and then they say if it's complex enough or accept it as a final practical work. And so for me, it was basically moving from NT and Exchange 5.5 to Windows 2000 and Exchange 2000, which was a big change in Active Directory and other things, right? So I had to do that in a live environment. So it wasn't allowed to be like hey, here we have a test lab, do it there, but it had to actually be a real project that can be done. And that was like on the practical IT work, my project. So that's a little bit how it started. And that's why I'm saying I imagined all fancy big data centers, lots of flights to reality that I met. But no regrets in anything. I loved it. I learned so much, obviously, and I actually would even recommend it because, like, even being at a partner, right, you see so many different environments versus just being an in-house. Like, I went to school with people that were at IBM, IT apprentice, for example, right? But they just knew the IBM network or the challenges of the IBM environment, where I had the best, like, from individual to larger government customers, everything.
Yeah, I think I've had a few guests on the podcast, and we've spoken about I think in one of the episodes we described like MSP years, so working at like a managed service provider or a partner, as like dog years. So like 1 year is like 7 years, because you do get so much experience with different customer environments. And I think the apprentice approach is so good because um everyone wants work experience, and everyone wants you to have that real life applicability of the knowledge that you've learned. But if you spent 4 years at university with your heads in books and working on test environments or whatever, you might know everything there is to know about a subject, but when it comes to actually dealing with people and projects and all that jazz, that is something that I think you need real life experience to learn. So I really, really like that approach. I actually wish that apprenticeships for these kind of subject areas would become more popular. I think it would be a great way to get more people into the industry.
I mean, I would add here is like in Switzerland, where it's such a big part of just how we grew up, it's just normal.
Yeah.
Even though university is basically free compared to counterparts in other countries, but if you go to a country like even a US tech company, right, all of a sudden the college degree seems to matter more than anything else. So because culturally, not because Microsoft says so, culturally, from other nations who are not familiar with apprentices. So I felt for myself sometimes, right, it's like almost a safety bet. If I applied for a job and you didn't know me, right, you're receiving resumes, and then you have MIT, something else fancy, and then here's a guy. What's the college name? What? Technische Berufsschule Zurich. What's that? Like, you don't even know what to do with that. And so now you can take a bet on me, and maybe I'm good. But if I'm not good, maybe somebody's going to criticize you. It's like, man, that was a bad hire. And now, we're still like one person down in the team and things like that. If you hired a guy from MIT and he's bad, you're like, man, I don't know what happened to the MIT. They must have really reduced like the entry requirements. Like, it must be a sure bet. I take one from MIT, so everything is going to be fine. And so almost all my career advances, almost not all, have been people that know me, that worked with me, that actually never cared about the CV.
Yeah.
Where if I just apply to a random team. They don't know me. There is no existing relationship. I find it challenging to get the traction. So there is like sometimes, there was like, should I do an EMBA or is like, something like this? But then you're like, what's an MBA these days? Everybody has one. So like
Yeah.
you stand out. And if you do an EMBA, then it just costs like a ridiculous amount of money for something everybody has, right? But
Yeah.
there is, like, I would say, this trade-off. While in Switzerland, somebody in my family just became a VP at a large Swiss banks from a sales apprenticeship.
Right.
These are stories that you don't see that often outside of Switzerland, where
No.
my brother was a car mechanic apprentice. Now he owns his own car dealership. A lot of his friends own their small businesses. A
Yep.
close friend of mine, baker apprentice, owns his own bakership with multiple stores that sell it, right? And so kind of
Yep.
like that, again, like culturally is definitely makes it work or fail, the system.
Yeah, absolutely. When you say apprenticeship in the UK, it's very much linked to just trades. So a plumber, joiner, electrician, for instance, my brother, when he came out of the military, he did an apprenticeship as a plumber. He now runs his own plumbing business, but I mean, he started in lockdown of 2020, so it's been tough. But yeah, you equate apprenticeships to more of the trades. When I did my graduate program at Thales, they were actually bringing on apprenticeships for some of their engineering roles. And I think at that time they were also thinking about doing apprenticeships for the business graduate roles, which is what I'd done. And I thought that was a great idea because I literally got in there because, well, I did really well in my interview, but it seemed like a fluke to me because I had my law degree and I'd been trying to get a traineeship, but I wanted it so much. I kept fumbling all the interviews, but also I didn't have the nice school that I came from or the really great grades in first and second year and all that kind of stuff. So I never made it there. But it's funny now that I'm not in law, my law degree, that little badge, honestly, just I could feel it in like my initial interviews for the grad scheme or even going into like tech and IT. Everyone's like, oh, law degree, you must be really clever. And it's like, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not. I am, but it does seem to be this tick in the box, like you say, if you've just got resumes coming through. And I would say all my career moves have definitely been made as well through people that I know and have worked with. I honestly don't know if I could face applying sort of coldly for a role. I should probably do that at some point just to work on those skills and get out that comfort zone. But
I mean, it's like with everything, right? Like all circumstances are different, right? It's like, but before I get ahead of myself, because I figured you probably would ask, because the Snowboard company actually came off
yes,
during that apprenticeship. It formalized after graduation, but I loved snowboarding. And back then in Switzerland, the skiers in the national team, they got all the attention. Even though the snowboarders did way better at global competition than the skiers at that time. Now we have a lot of great skiers and we used to have a lot. So there was just like a period of time where snowboarders did a lot of gold, but they haven't gotten like the same treatments or things like that. So snowboarding was always kind of like looked at as a secondary or like an underdog sports overall. And so with everything I learned about e-commerce and other things in school, I'm like, let's do this. That's like, we love snowboarding. Let's find a way how we can support the snowboarding culture in Switzerland. And that kind of like how it came off the idea. And then we took it from there and then you evaluated. And then we basically came up with where you kind of like, now today there's actually websites. It's almost sad that I didn't pursue it longer. Like I had like you could make your customized snowboards and you could make your own designs. Now remind you that was like in the early 2000s. That was before an iPhone, so not everybody had access to like Adobe Illustrator or was like talented to use vector graphics systems and things like that. So what we've done is we asked graphics students from university to participate, that they didn't owe me anything, but if a customer would say, hey, I want a custom design for like 2 different packages, and then if you accept the job, then you accept kind of like those SLAs, where it's like, within 7 days you have to deliver something. I take care of the payment. Majority of money would go to you, but kind of like that gig economy, a very early one. Now today, you have designguru.com, you have fiverr.com, you have like you get designers at all corners. But it was basically integrated in our e-commerce, where it's like I take one of the standard designs that we pay designers to do. I can do my own and you just downloaded the template, or I want to pay somebody to do that. But I didn't tell you just like, okay, go figure it out. I said, okay, we'll take care of that too, and provide you with designers that can help you with that. And so that was kind of interesting. But anyhow, we did this for a few years.
Yeah.
The more years we did it, the more I learned about Snowboard. And in those years where we were like in the best year, Snowboard sales, that's without accessories, just Snowboard tax itself, was just a little bit north of 60 millions, while skis at their bottom sales historically was at roughly 200 million.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
and so in Switzerland, I would say for a medium-sized or even a small, not even medium, a small-sized businesses, you will need a few $1 million in revenue. So simple as that. If you're going to have a few employees that you're going to pay full time, you're going to need to bring in a few $1 million. So a few $1 million, let's start. $6 million would be 10% market share. Right? 10%. In the market back then where Burton owned over 80%, and then you had probably another 60, 70 snowboard manufacturers that shared like 14, 18%.
Okay.
So how do you eat that? Then the marketing in snowboard, when you talk to snowboard shops, they love the product, they love the quality, but for them, it's like every kid wants what Shaw White writes.
Yeah.
Snowboard is 100% an emotional sport. It's not like cars or PC where you had these reviews where it's like, here's a medium-sized compact car from Opel, from Renault, from Peugeot, whatever, and this is how they compare, and this is the price difference. The snowboard is like who you associate with. So you had like the classy styles like Shaw White's. You had the punk rock styles, or the people really with the pants below their butts.
Yeah.
So whatever, you were like, I'm a gangster hip hop, or this is the brand you drive. So it was like an emotional brand association, really, more than anything. So a salesperson,
like early influencers.
Yes, and so the salespeople would tell me, your product, I have to explain, while a kid comes in, wants the most expensive snowboard and throws a tantrum if daddy doesn't want to pay for it, or mommy, right?
Yeah.
And so, Sir, I don't need much of convincing or selling to do. So I met all these challenges, and then in our supply chain, we hit some roadblocks where they wanted to force us to buy like the base material. You need to make the base in mass, but in masses for hundreds of snowboards. And today, quite frankly, you would be surprised how few snowboard brands actually have their own factories. The majority of snowboards is done by ski manufacturers who already have the machine. So they just give them the design, the specs, and they run it for them. And so while you still have a lot of labels, again, because it's a label and the emotional association with those, and the riders, they can pay to do fancy tricks, but the products themselves are often made by a ski manufacturer.
Wow. So you decided to step out of that game.
Yeah, but like similar to the college degree, it gave me a lot of wind in my other careers, a lot of a network, huge network, like even in Switzerland across the board, where it's like I never took any like credit from a bank, because I always said, if I stop this, I don't want to have a debt that I need to pay off, right? So I basically worked part-time in IT to finance the snowboard company, basically. So I did.
Wow.
I worked for a law firm at the time as a support person in Switzerland, and then when that came with the roadblock with the supply chain, I had to reassess, because I would have to take credit to pay for that much base material, and at the rate, oh no, I fall off. At the rate we were producing snowboards, this would have been good enough for years, and the material, changes too. So it was kind of like, okay, this was a good run for years. We won some awesome prizes, like freestyle.ch was the largest freestyle event in Europe in that scene. They gave us in 2005 the prize for most innovative Swiss label in the industry. So again, like, still very fond memories of that whole time. Super excited we've done it, but it was time to move on and kind of like focus on something else. And that's kind of like, I would say, then the more traditional career took off from after that, where I said, okay, I'm ready to go full time into something.
And so how did you land your first role at Microsoft, and what was that?
So I was living in Miami for like 18 months, working for the law firm in a different capacity. So I
Oh,
met
okay.
my wife, and then my dad was in retirement age. And while I had a comfortable position at the law firm, I felt like I wanted something else, like, just to grow. I was like not even 30 at that point. So I was like, I need some new challenges. And then basically I was applying at jobs at Microsoft that, you didn't really know what to get into, and then landed a job as a technical account manager in Microsoft Switzerland.
Oh, nice.
And that's basically how I got the foot into the door at Microsoft. And ever since I met Microsoft, I had that goal. One day I want to be in engineering, because I would say in IT apprentice, I couldn't even dream of working for Microsoft. I had no idea how big their operations was in Switzerland. That all came like later on.
Yeah.
And then it's like, let's see if I can make it. I don't have a university degree. Sometimes they're very, particular about that. Seems they weren't. I got a chance. I started there, and then I would lie if I say it was like, a clear path from there. But like ever since, kind of like there was check foot into the door. Now work really, really hard and try to see if you can make to engineering in Redmond. And here I am. So it's taken me a few years, but
Wow, that is amazing. So you moved from Miami back to Switzerland, and then okay, so how did you then land your Redmond role in engineering, and what role was that?
So originally it was marketing. So like
Mhm.
once you worked in the it's easier to, I think, to move overall in the role. And not every story is the same, but like
Yeah.
my mentors and things like that always said, if you move to Corp, if you do it in a role that you're familiar overall with, the role is easier than moving kind of like making that big of a move and learn a whole new, where like you have a different rhythm of business and things like that.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, again, you work with people. So if you worked in field marketing, so I started as technical account manager,
Uh-huh.
then became the Azure product marketing manager in Switzerland, then got the business group role, which is kind of like the lead for everything that was cloud and AI at the time.
Mhm.
Then while I was in this role, I worked really close and had a very good standing with the leadership team in Switzerland. And they originally told me that I should commit for 2 more years, because I was working on the Swiss data center. We announced the Swiss data centers.
Right, yep.
And then I went to our annual conference here in Vegas, and out of nowhere, basically within the same week, I had 2 teams asking me to join, which again wasn't like a cold application. And then, even though that was like just a few months after the leadership team asked me for 2 years, I talked to my boss at the time, and he's like, when Corp asks, you got to go. And so I went there, and because it was like 2 offers, it was kind of awkward. I wasn't not used to that, specifically not from the same company.
Mhm.
And so I decided to move in the role that was closer to engineering, still marketing, but with
Mhm.
the idea, right? It's like, I'm old enough to know there's your imagination of what a role might be or how
Yeah,
it is, but until
yeah.
you walked in the shoes of that role, it's exactly that. So my goal was like, okay, if I can at least partner with them, I get to learn more, I can ask questions, I can grow a network and basically go from there. And then, so I was working as the hybrid marketing lead here at Corp, all up. That was like when we announced ARC, etc.
Yep.
And then moved on to some IoT products, as well as the Azure Stack Edge and Azure Stack Hub. And
Mhm.
now I'm in the engineering team from Azure Stack Hub. So working closely with engineering, was able to build up some relationships in those teams. And
Mhm.
then when the time was ready that they had a fit for me, I made the move, and I'm super excited. So I moved, I think, end of October last year, so I'm still learning a lot, but super excited to be here. Like when it actually happened, sounds stupid, man. Now people are gonna leave me in comments, but I literally called my mom, my parents, and said, like, who knew? Like seriously, like I was at the not unmanaged Microsoft partners where my IT career started.
Yep.
And now I get to influence the direction, the features that go in a product that is being sold worldwide. And so to me, it
Yeah.
was like, extremely
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. I
Now,
think I think it's so important though to celebrate your wins. It's important to celebrate your wins, and it's important to look back and at your journey and how you got there, and celebrate it when you get there. I love that. So how long have you been in Redmond now? So at Corp?
So I moved like towards the end of 2018. I think it was also mid of October. So basically 3 years in a marketing role at Corp, and then to jump over like Takeshi, who leads the commercial cloud business on the marketing side. He's a very funny person. In his new hire speech, he usually says something like the first year you're a best case liability, and then you start to add value. But he doesn't mean it like in a mean way. Like
Yeah.
I don't think anybody felt offended. What he was trying to say is like, give yourself some grace, some time. This is
Yes.
a super complex environment. We're like such a huge corporation, right? And obviously everybody is eager to provide value, right? Like in my case, they paid for my relocation. So you're kind of like, forget private life. I'm gonna dig in, right? Like I'm gonna prove my worth, and
Prove myself. Yeah.
kind of like saying that's normal.
Yeah.
And it's also normal, it's going to take you some time. And while we understand that when we bring you here, this is not, while you hit the ground running, there's so much to learn and how to navigate, this huge company. And so I appreciated that, but just saying, right? Like, so I think, yeah, it took some while to ramp up, get to know everything there. Then I made those jumps inside of the marketing team. And then now with engineering, it's actually similar. It's different, but learning the different teams, who works on what. So this feature has a dependency on that, right? As you can imagine, Active Directory, while it is a product for customer, Active Directory is in everything. But that doesn't mean that every product team has its own dedicated Active Directory engineering, right? So there's a dependency. So if I may want to do a change or we design something new, I need to know, like, okay, who's that team? Who am I going to talk to about this feature, or like why we're doing this? Who do I need to convince or get a buy-in? And so that's the same thing now. So marketing, I knew a lot of, specifically when it's around Azure Stack Hub and then later IoT. But now in engineering, it's again, I just learned, thanks to what Microsoft leaders said, be graceful with yourself. Like, don't be too harsh. I mean, we all do the same mistakes, but
I struggled with that when I joined Dell. I am used to starting a job, hitting the ground running, delivering value straight away. And I was warned at Dell as well that I can hear echo, I think. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But yeah, I was warned at Dell as well that it would take me 6 to 12 months to ramp up. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, sure, they don't know who I am. And then I spent the first 3 months, I was consistently sort of suggesting things or asking questions. And I was constantly told, we've done that. We can't do that. This is why we have this. This is why we have that. And it like knocked me down. And then I suffered from major imposter syndrome because I was like, why am I on this team with all these great people? And then I went through this total little roller coaster for 6 months, 9 months. In hindsight, I really should have given myself more grace. I still managed to get up to speed and deliver value quite early on, much to everyone's surprise. So that was nice. But yeah, I think if I was to ever make a move like that again, I would hope that I had learned my lesson and would give myself some more grace. And it's funny that you talk about how they'd paid for your relocation, so you're there. So then you're like, oh my God, I must prove myself. And it's so funny because I was having a chat with my friend who's got a new role, and it's big jump in pay. She was totally underpaid before. I pushed her to go for this sort of number. And then they're like, worrying about what am I going to have to do for this money and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, nothing. Just be you. They're hiring you at that pay point for you now. I was like, then start talking to them about how much more they're going to give you if you build on that. But yeah, it's an interesting topic that. when you move roles.
And I think, despite our learnings, right? You mentioned it like in a previous call. So I made this blog about my goals.
Yes.
And it's not the first year I'm setting myself goals. I'm a big believer, even though there's currently an anti-goal thing. Again, like too much pressure, like,
Yep.
now it's OKR, objectives, and
Mhm.
things like that. But whatever you want to call it, for me to set something to work towards to contribute just for my own sake, growth, etc.,
Yep.
is something I believe in. I like to me, like just waiting for things to change doesn't work. You got to work on that change yourself. But this year, even though I know better, I overdid it in January. Like, despite all my learnings, everything in life, I signed up for too many things and it became a struggle, like to find adequate
Even
time
after
for everything.
even after you did your review of 2021 and then you're setting goals for 2022, because I seen a video and you said that you were going to reduce your goals and make them more manageable. I think I'm telling you, it's that cultural pressure of January. So I specifically didn't do anything in January, and I decided I was going to take it easy and I was going to start my new year in February. But then when we spoke, I realized I had 7 days to February. I hadn't actually got myself to the place I wanted to be, and now we are the 1st of Feb, and I still don't really know where I'm going. So I
Again,
need
be
to
grateful with
start the other
yourself.
way.
I mean, for me, it's like what pushed it a little bit over the boundary is like I signed up for things that weren't goals necessarily, but
Mhm.
things that popped up interested me, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably helpful. Or I always wanted to do something like this, but just like at work, you're gonna have that kickoff of your fiscal year. It is like, these are the 5 things we do very great. 2 months into it, oh, we need to do this and we need to this, but nobody goes back to those 5 things and say,
Mhm.
okay, let's remove this and we add this instead, right? You add
Mhm.
and celebrate it. Basically, the same thing happened to me. I was realistic about 5 goals. I think I was realistic, and then it's like, oh yeah, that sounds like that's a good opportunity. Let's do it. Or like that's a good opportunity. Let's do it. And then before I knew, I was like in all these things. And then when I committed, I will deliver. Now, good news is some of them were just like a 1 month program started mid, so it's until mid February. One program is until end of March, so that's going to take me a little bit longer, but it has been great so far. But like, yeah, if I would have to redo it, I would have at least removed one thing just to give me a little bit more time in January. But that said, I think you mentioned you wanted to talk also about one of a topic
Yeah.
very near
So
to my heart.
on
Hybrid.
on goals actually before
Okay.
so actually two more areas just before we move on.
Okay.
One, what are you going to miss most about working in the marketing role? And two, what are you looking forward to most having moved into engineering?
Okay.
These will
So
be three because I've got one more.
I would say marketing, the easiest thing to say, what's the most awesome thing about marketing in a tech company is you get to talk about all the fancy stuff. Like even for my video blogs last year when I did every week one, overall there's always something new in one product area. Like as
Mm,
simple as that, right? There's just a natural flow. You hear all the customer success. Oh, let's do customer evidence with customer A. And obviously, if they're willing to do a customer evidence, they're very satisfied customers, right? In
mhm.
general. And so you're kind of like very much on the positive side of news cycles, moments, things like that.
Yep.
And in the engineering side, now I do ticket reviews for the features I own, support requests to make sure how can we increase stability. You have some escalations that are not necessarily good. Now, obviously, once it reaches engineering, it's a big problem to be solved, right? So it's not like first, second, or third level, even like by the time it reaches us. So in marketing, I didn't have much of that. You may have had a conference where somebody said, this is
Yeah.
bad, or this is not, like the typical things, but not like as I'm involved in now. So like that in marketing, all I'm saying is like marketing is all the flashy, fancy positiveness, more or less, with its challenges, but a lot of that.
Hmm.
And then like in engineering, what I really like is actually being able to contribute in the direction, even if it's
Hmm.
a subset of products or even features in a product, to enable our customers. Again, like you said, we're all the sum of our experiences,
Yep.
and you want to see, and then you also learn, like you said, limitations, right? Maybe something is not good here or not good there. And at Microsoft, more often than not all products, Azure allowed us to do a lot of things from scratch. But when you think
Mhm.
about a lot of big traditional products, Windows, SQL, the legacy and the backwards compatibility that these products bring is mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like, Microsoft is a culture, never been just a company that says, okay, screw that. Like, how would we redesign this if we were to start from a green slate in 2022? Go. And then we just discontinue. No, it's like customers have, there has been maybe features that have been discontinued. And whenever you're hit with that, for you, it's very frustrating. But obviously, Microsoft does make data driven decisions in these circumstances. But my point is, there can be historically things where I say, can I do X, where X is not possible because we respect certain legacy and backwards compatibility. So I
Yeah.
have to find a new way, right? And so, like, understanding again, what are the challenges? Because sometimes in marketing or as a customer, you're like, why is it not doing this? Or
Yeah.
why can't it seems so easy, right? Just
Yeah.
add this functionality. And then
Yeah.
when you're in it, like with everything that you probably know too now at Dell, right? It's like before in marketing, people assumed, oh, marketing at Microsoft is awesome. All the money in the world, what constraints, or like in engineering, but it doesn't matter. Either way, if you're marketing or not, just because Microsoft has a lot of money doesn't mean you get a lot of money.
Yeah.
It can actually be that they say, yeah, you better find a way to be differentiated to our main competitors. But yeah, this year we actually going to give you like 20% of the budget you had last year. Bye, good luck. And so you have to really cut down to like what's the most essential thing you can do. And that engineering world, just
Mhm.
now as we're working on products, is you have the same thing. You don't have unlimited developers.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of good ideas, a lot of good features. There's product quality things we need to improve. We need to work on new products that the world may not know now.
Yeah.
So prioritize that. Where can we have the biggest impact? That's, I would say, is part of a big challenge in the corporate world, kind of like make the right bets
Mhm.
as to
Yeah.
where you focus on. And
Yeah.
so that's to the question, what I look most forward at in engineering is exactly that, kind of like really influence the strategy and the direction our products go forward.
Yes. Okay, let's just jump on then to what we're going to go to, what the topic where we're going to go to next that you were hinting at, which is just basically hybrid, right? Because you and me have got together before and we've gone on rants about multi-cloud and hybrid cloud and everything. So, oh, I can hear myself again. I don't know what's going on. Is that me?
I muted my microphone when you talk. I don't know what it is. I'll do it again. So you keep
That's
going.
okay. And to be honest, I probably won't edit this out. So let's just get stuck into hybrid. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what do you think makes Microsoft's hybrid strategy stand out against the likes of AWS and Google?
Now I have friends that work in both, but still, I would say like Microsoft is unique in any way, and I'll give you the reasons for that. So first of all, Google and Amazon or AWS in that particular instance, they come from the cloud into your on-premise,
Mm,
and we know they found out it's more complicated than the cloud. We
yep,
came from the data center into the cloud.
yep,
And so if you were to ask what's the main difference, so the main difference is literally hybrid is it's like part of Microsoft's history, just as anything. And then if we're looking a little bit more detailed today, okay, what's hybrid? Because people hear Arc and TOS, you have Outpost and other products at AWS. And so but the key difference is most of these products of our competitors are point solutions. So, okay, you give me Outpost. I get a rack of hardware. I can put it in my data center. It's managed by you, right? Does have value, sure, but is that all in your hybrid world you have? Because you see, where I come from is you have productivity. So, what do they offer in the productivity space for hybrid? Because hybrid is not limited to infrastructure.
yep,
So Is there an Office competitor I don't know Amazon has that runs on premises? Does G Suite have a full running offline version that, oh no, how many people still have Exchange Server? We know it's more than we thought, because when that last security thing was that attacked Exchange servers, because some companies in some countries still have Exchange. They didn't maybe migrate everybody to Office 365, right? And so when you look at that just realistically from a full IT need of any company, we have Dynamics. Dynamics is available on premises. You have Office is available on premises. You have GitHub is available on premise.
Yeah.
You have Windows Server, all these things. So basically everything we have here is pretty much extensible to here, where now our competitors come in with an infra play, or maybe with a very good container play. And I'm not saying they don't provide any value, but if you would ask, okay, what's the key differentiator in hybrid, is that Microsoft has left to right everything that you can use on premises or in the cloud. You can extend it, you can move things forward and backwards, and that is true to our productivity suite, to business application, and that is true in the more like traditional infrastructure side where we usually hang around. And so for me, it's very clear that, again, like I would challenge you if somebody would say my hybrid strategy is Antos as an example. I'm like, okay, what does Antos do for your productivity? Like,
I think that's not a hybrid strategy. That's a containers on-prem strategy. Like you say, that's a point solution strategy. And we're not saying that these other clouds don't have value, because they absolutely do. And we've used this analogy before, and then I've gone on to use it in my calls, where we've described the sort of cloud native platforms as fruit. Okay, so you can't, it's not apples for apples. It's like an apple against a banana, like against an orange. Each of them, you eat them differently. They taste differently. They give you a different experience. You can bake different things with them. So they are all different, and they do have their pros and their cons. But I think that's how I describe it, is that Microsoft grew up in the on-premises world. And they've always had that in the back of their mind, and therefore they are hybrid by design, right? Is the kind of marketing spiel that we give. But is there anything else that you're seeing in the hybrid market that's not Azure or Microsoft related, that's either compatible with Azure Arc and Azure Stack HCI, or it's not, but it's something that excites you in the hybrid space?
I mean, in the hybrid space, and like you mentioned it, I think maybe it was in one of the calls we had with multi-cloud, right? So if you want to be very basics about hybrid, right? Like hybrid is two different things that perform the same thing. A hybrid car has a combustion engine and has an electric engine, right? Both move your car, so they come together, move your car in a more fuel efficient manner. Hybrid, if I would take that analogy to a hybrid is two different things. Could be your hoster, your on-premises, could be whatever. Now we're talking about the edge, the other big word besides, multi-cloud, and depending on experts, there's a lot of opinion. But at the end of the day, it is an application running somewhere, most likely on a smaller form factor than in a data center, and then we call it the edge, versus hybrid when it's your data center on the cloud, but this smaller application at the edge also works with the cloud, right? So what excites me is obviously that expansion of, again, like what needs to be computing at the edge, as an example. So that forefront, which for me at the end of the day is, sure, call it edge, call it, I don't care what you call it, but it's hybrid. It's two things that perform that application, right? So you do video analytics at the edge, great, but you're still going to use the data to train the master AI model in the cloud, and then update all your cameras, because otherwise each of your camera is only going to be as smart as the sum of things it analyzed. And you want to obviously benefit and make like a fleet smartness and put all the experiences of your assets together. So I think, to me, that whole growth into the edge and what it will do there, the fact that you can take more and more technology with you, that is definitely something that excites me, and where I also believe that Microsoft, again, is like very, very much well positioned. I think that, for example, multi-cloud, I often, in my personal experience talking to customers, is hybrid was kind of like by design for most. So we were on premises, there's this new thing, So we maybe moved the CRM out there, maybe we moved some web applications out there, depending this department did something here. But it was kind of like by design because you're home protected base. And then there's the smaller companies that didn't have a legacy or whatever, and they went just to the cloud. The point is, today, I think the multi-cloud is similar to your legacy IT, a circumstance that happened. It's not necessarily something strategic. People say it's strategic,
Yeah.
but I have yet to see a clear strategy where they do. Because what I often tell customers, right, like in the cloud specifically, right, how do you determine which application you run on which cloud? Because
Mhm.
the clear reality of the cloud is the amount of updates cloud providers do in features is ridiculous. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't keep up. So whatever you work in your traditional enterprise IT, let's say you make a new app. It's going to take you a year or two until this app is live. In a year or two, whatever you thought, oh, cloud A has an advantage because look at this
Yeah.
awesome feature. By the time you hit publish, there might be 17 better, easier, more performant, cost efficient way to do exactly the same thing as you just wrote
Yeah.
in another cloud. If you say, oh, it's price, I did the math. Sure. It's like, guess who doesn't tell you that tomorrow cloud provider B is going to reduce the price? You don't know
Mhm.
that. I don't know that. I don't know what Microsoft is going to do, right? So are you flexible enough to move these terabytes or petabytes of data within weeks to whoever is the cheapest?
Mm.
You know what I mean? So tell me, like, where is your rationale, right? So it's like the problem is with large enterprises, you have talent you hire. They may be familiar with cloud provider C, and then you set them on something and they push really hard to do it. And because you don't actually care that much, but it allows the talent and he can promise he can do it faster because he has the existing skill sets, you may agree to it because, you know, it adheres to basic data privacy, blah, 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 right? And that's then becomes the reality. And I think that is something that I would say was one of the most interesting learnings when I started at Microsoft as a technical account manager. I had an account.
Mhm.
They literally said Skype for Business is the best product we've ever done. They loved it. And I had another customer, they hit 7 product bugs that we classified as bugs, but we declined to fix. So obviously, as you can imagine, that customer didn't have a single good word about Skype, but this one loved it. So what
Yeah.
was the difference? Same product. The difference is the legacy of their environment, all their merger acquisitions. Some people have Active Directory, some identity from Oracle in there, and then this and Federation and whatever their network routing is. And then in one environment, Skype for Business seemed to run very well, where the same product in another environment doesn't. And if you add the complexity of the cloud, and that's
Mm.
my personal opinion is, I overall also try to reduce in my personal life the amount of vendors I use.
Yeah.
If I have an insurance provider that I'm happy with, I rather deal with one party than have for each single thing I have insurance, a different provider, a different hotline, whatever to call.
Yeah.
And I would say the same is for your IT strategy. And you can definitely go for whatever is the flashiest at the moment,
Yeah.
but don't like fool yourself in thinking that that whole red tail of support, skills, complexity you add into the system, where I think today in general, where not absolutely necessary, you should start with simplicity.
I think the marketing out there is multi-cloud is the future. Everyone's going to multi-cloud. I mean, one, we could have a discussion about what you define as multi-cloud, because if, for instance, someone is consuming SaaS products like Salesforce, etc., and they're, okay, they're multi-cloud because they're consuming different things, but I don't think that multi-cloud is. I think that people are, like you say, going to be there by circumstance. It is going to grow. But I think the only people who would be doing multi-cloud, in my mind correctly, are probably companies who are already started in the cloud, know exactly what they are doing, have embraced cloud completely, and then are they know what services, etc., they want to take advantage of in each cloud, specifically for whatever they're building. I think companies who say, I'm going to distribute my data, etc., for cost and all this kind of stuff, you're way back in I think they used to call it like cloud mindset 1.0, you're there, you're back in that IaaS and cost of compute and storage and trying to move around the numbers, and you're missing the point as to the value that you can get out of the cloud. So it's an interesting space. When I talk about it with, I've had salespeople, actually, teams ask me to come on and say, Lisa, can you just give us like a candid view of what you think about multi-cloud? And I'm like, are you sure you want my candid view? But I say to them, right, I say, when your customer mentions cloud or multi-cloud or anything like that, the first thing that you have to do is get a definition from them as to what they mean and ask what they are looking to achieve from it. And then don't bother correcting them if it is or it isn't multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, etc. Just focusing on what they're trying to achieve. And if they can't articulate it, then either help them or understand that it is probably just a bit of a buzzword test, and also just checking that you know your stuff, or something like that. But it's an interesting one.
I think two things I'd like to add to what you said. You brought up very good points. So the first thing why marketing is talking about multi-cloud is, I think every company in the tech sector has understood that this is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And with anything that is reality, you can like it or you don't like it, you can embrace it or you can fight it.
Yeah.
And I think AWS, in my memory, was the one that was the longest with like on the cloud and only AWS is enough, kind of like,
Yeah.
because we have good services and blah, 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 blah. But
Mhm.
again, the reality just is, for so many different reasons, is there will be, like you said, if that is SaaS, a Salesforce, like there's a company in Switzerland, I always say they're a reference customer of everybody. Doesn't matter if you make software, you sold to some department and got them to agree, you'll be a customer reference, a really large company, but everybody knows they're a big customer or consumer of SAP, but they may also have your Salesforce, but it's that small department of 5 people.
Mm.
It's not that whole enterprise is running on your system, right? It's not what you tell. But my point is, so you embrace it and say, hey, I accept that reality and I'm actually supporting you in your reality for what it is, versus trying to fight it. And the second thing that you brought up with cost, right? Every time I have the cost discussion is usually not with finance people, but it's with IT people that have that cost reason. But to be fair with them, that's often how they're looked at.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it hurts my heart. Sometimes I'm like, because as a technical account manager, I got to meet a lot of IT teams, enterprise IT teams. It's like their employer puts so much the cost screw on it, sees IT as a necessary evil, and this other department just hired one of the leading super expensive consulting firm to figure out how to digitalize a process, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, dude, you have some beautiful geeks in your IT department. Like, and I'm not saying, right, like not everybody, I also had to learn that, like, obviously for me in the tech industry and others in the tech industry, like yourself, we're obviously fascinated. That's why we work in that industry. But there are people that work in IT where it's a 9 to 5. It's just a job. It's like a job that pays a good income, that allows them to live the life. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I know no judgment whatsoever, but I'm just saying, not every enterprise department will have hundreds of people that are the same way interested as me, but I think there should be. But I really believe that CEOs and business teams need to start looking at IT way more as an asset.
Yeah.
And opening that channel. And I'm not saying forget the consulting companies. They have their the reason why they're there and they're helpful and they provide value. What I'm saying is like, don't make that clear separation where it's like, oh, my IT kind of like is like my archive. There's like a necessary evil. We need it just as we need desks to work on. And then for everything fancy, I go over there. There might be a healthy mix to actually help you leverage the cost center as an asset. Versus just because I can't blame it on a CIO if the CFO just, it's like the same with us. Can I blame a seller to not sell a product or prioritize if I say your livelihood depends on this? Like, I made that culture. I told you, sure, sell your banana, but don't expect any money for it. But if you sell peaches, then we're talking. For every 100 peaches, your salary goes up, and that's very, like, of course I'm
Yeah.
gonna focus on selling peaches. So, and so that's why I'm saying, right, like, it's a very sad reality still today. Some companies get better. Some companies have business IT units, and then their centralized IT is considered a cost center where business IT has, fancier things to play with and better budgets. But in
Yeah.
general, I think there's still that mindset out there where it's just like it's a must have. We need to have computers. It doesn't work, but it's not seen as an asset.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The cost discussion does always bring up so many different tracks. For instance, I've seen blogs be posted about how it's easy, it's cheap to test in the cloud, but it's expensive to succeed or put things into production. It's like, nah, when you're in the cloud, 9 times out of 10, if I hear someone say, "Oh my God, we moved to the cloud and it's so expensive," and I'm like, "Yeah, did you lift and shift as was? Or did you embrace cloud mentality? Do you still have like 80% spare capacity on your virtual machines? Did you actually change to, modernize and replatform and use some PaaS services? Like, so yeah, when we talk about cost, it's one of those funny things that you could go down so many avenues to actually determine what you mean.
It's almost, it's almost a person with an electric drill turning the drill to put in the screw.
Yes.
You're using the new
Yeah.
tool, but you're really doing it the old way. And
Yeah.
the other thing I would add with the cost, like in IT people, just IT without CFO presence, I have yet to meet the one that actually knows the real cost in his unit. Doesn't matter of the size, because more often than not, that if you're a small business, the room where your server is that on your cost center.
Mm,
Do you know the square feet price of your prime location over there? Oh, you don't. If you're a large company like Microsoft, the houses are in the facility management budget, right?
yeah.
So the data center building, the people that clean it, if you have a data center because you're a big enterprise, is that on your cost? Do you see that? Is that or not? So you see what you paid Dell and you see what you paid for Windows, like, oh, okay, and you see the salary of your people. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's probably all the cost there is, right? Like, come on, don't kid me. Like, even the electrician, you see what the network cabling costs, but you didn't
Yeah.
see the stuff to hook up the monitors and everything on the table. That's a
Yeah.
different like position, right? And like to have that clear view, like AC maintenance and all that stuff, where like obviously in the cloud, that's in your minute price or whatever price meters you
It's
have. And like you said, like mix all this that you
yeah.
actually don't compare the same things, you
Yeah.
don't use smart tools, or it's like, so your machines really all have to work 24/7? Because in our world, if you turn them off, they stop counting except storage. So you don't have that luxury in your data center.
Yeah. It's so funny talking about this. This totally brings me back to AWS training I did years ago. And the whole training was really about TCO and getting a customer to literally detail all of their costs of their data center and then show them how it'd be so much cheaper in AWS. Literally, that was it. That was the whole training. And it's so true. That people don't, just like they don't, if you ask them, can you give me a record of all your servers, what they're running and how they're doing, that's also, and this is no, can I use the word shade? I don't know if I'm that cool. There's no shade to those teams. It's more that is a reality of operating. It's a
Yeah.
reality of technical debt. It's a reality of not being seen as an asset, being pressurized, like all those kind of things. That is the reality of where these teams are operating. And I do feel sorry for them as well. So many Microsofts, Dells, AWS going in at the C-level, selling all the stuff. They come out like, we're doing Azure. I want you to move everything to Azure. And the IT team's like, well, I mean, about 80%, I'm pretty sure can't move to Azure. So, but that's where Azure Stack HCI comes in. Anyway, we are at the top, we are at the top of the hour, and I did actually try to say to myself this year that I would keep our
45 minutes.
podcast to at least an hour. I mean, we could talk forever.
Yes.
But yeah, we're coming to the hour now. So I just want to say a massive thank you for joining. good luck in your new role. Well done.
Thank you.
And I look forward to maybe working with you more in that role too.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well. And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.